with multiple dimensions existing, and they're all existing simultaneously, hence everything's predetermined because everything is living in a bell curve within your life. And since you're living inside of that bell curve, yes, there's things that aren't possible for you, but you can move through your bell curve and move yourself to the outer limits of the possibilities for that life. So it's almost like hopping through the pages. So you can get from page 1 to the last page. It takes you a longer period of our time, because if you think about it, you're living your life. As you're jumping pages at different points in your life going this way. So the reason your choices matter is because if you're continuously making the choices that leads you towards the last page, your life is going to be completely different than what if you're just jumping from the first page to the second page and back and forth again. Inside the middle pages is your highest point of your bell curve. And then the first page and the last page are the outer limits of your bell curve. This booklet, it's almost like it's infinite, just like a piano could be infinite. Like you could put infinitely as many octaves as you want and make that piano as big as you want. But we don't. We shrink the octaves down to a point where there's only so many octaves on a piano because we only want the piano to be so big. It's just like the book. The book is only going to be technically a certain size. You're going to reach a limit of places you cannot get because the probability is 0. So if the probability on the inside of the bell curve is almost 100% and on the outside it's 0%, I mean, if you get to the outside at the 0%, you're going to be existing on the very boundary lines of what you could exist. So I mean, once you get there, I mean, I don't know, maybe a completely different bell curve would open up for you. I mean, but maybe by the time you get to that outer limit of where you could be, maybe you've lived long enough where you end up dying in all realities. So you can kind of think of the probability of the lives that you're living as collapsing the older that you get. So I mean, when you were younger, maybe there was like 100 billion possibilities of lives you could be living. And as you're going through those lives, those possibilities are going to be dying. If you go through one direction, it's like if you die in a reality, it's almost like, you know, you have this book and then that page gets ripped out, right? So you lose a couple of possibilities, but you could be on either side of that possibility. The longer you live in your life, the less probabilities that you have left over, because probabilities that you did have are going to no longer exist for you. How many different vibrations do you have on the Hertz scale? It's almost infinite, and eventually you're gonna get to a high enough Hertz sound where you can't hear it no more, but other beings and other animals per se are gonna be able to hear that vibration, right? So your life is the same thing. So I mean, sometimes those vibrations could, you know, collide with each other and could somewhat overlap a little bit. You can only have so many different notes in a scale. I mean, the multiverse is the same way. And like I said, when you talk about quantum physics, if you think about water and you think about the ocean, that's the most easy way to understand it. In the ocean, how many gazillions of drops of water are there in the ocean? And they're all moving separately, but at the same time, they're all moving in unison. All the particles that exist on our world and in our universe are doing the same thing. It's just a big ocean of energy that we're basically living in or living on. So each particle's kind of doing its own thing, but it's still, to a certain degree, it's entangled with every other particle. So it's not in literal contact with every other particle, but because eventually, if you follow enough particles, you know, you're gonna find a particle way out of the way over there, and even though it's not anywhere near this particle, they're still connected, because if this one goes up, then this one over here has to eventually go up too. The link is eventually going to affect this one. In essence, every particle in our entire world is connected, and it can't get away from being connected. And every particle has its own little bell curve of possibilities where it could be at any given time. But I mean, you can't literally jump from one Bell probability way outside of a 0% probability. That's why science can basically guess where a particle is going to be at any given time, because it can only go within the certain probability, and eventually the probability hits zero, that it can't be any further than that. But I mean, like I said, once you go to measure it, it breaks down to one probability, because that's what our observation does, is it takes the ocean of probabilities and breaks it down to one. Just like if you stick an eyedropper into the ocean, you have no idea what drop of water you're gonna get, but you can have an idea of what drop of water you're gonna get based on what part of the ocean you're sticking your eyedropper in. So that's kind of the conclusion that quantum physics is coming to. I hope that makes more sense now than it did before. I know the talk maybe wasn't as much about ghosts as what you thought it was going to be, but in my mind, that's basically the gist of explaining why ghosts could exist. Because I mean, when you see a ghost, it might not be able to affect anything around you, but yet you can still see it. So it can pass through things that you consider solid objects, but it's because it's not here, it's where it is. If you watch the movie The Others, that was a great movie, and I actually really enjoyed that movie because it explains this concept wholeheartedly. So in the movie, there's a mom and she has children, she's living in this house, and the father goes away to war. And the whole movie is going through her kids and hers ghostly encounters while she's living in this house. So she's tried to leave the house. As she's trying to leave the house, the fog gets really, really thick to the point where she can't go any further. So she ends up turning around and coming back to the house. They're having all these like paranormal experiences inside of the house, and they're living their lives. It comes to the end of the movie and you find out that her and her kids were actually the ghosts, and she's thinking she's living a normal life in the house, but meanwhile new people moved into the house and they're living in her old house, and they're being haunted by her and her kids. So that's kind of a really good analogy of what's happening in the multiverse. So literally in one dimension, she is living her life normally because she's alive, and that frequency is sometimes interacting with the frequency where she's not alive and she's not living in that house, so someone else is living in that house, and the frequencies overlap in different spots of the house at different times. And I mean, sometimes they don't overlap at all, so I mean, there's no ghostly encounters, and then you get to a certain point where they're overlapping again, and boom, in a certain room you got a certain ghostly encounter. And I mean, whether you're in that room or not in that room, the ghostly encounter is still happening. It's just that you don't know the ghostly encounter's happening because you're not in the room. But when you're in the room, you know. It's kind of the old adage, if a tree falls in the forest and there's nobody around to hear it, does it actually make a noise? If there's no one around to hear it, then obviously no, it doesn't make a noise, because you need an observer to experience it for it to actually exist. All right, if there's no observer to experience it, then even though something happened and there was a change, it technically didn't happen. It's kind of a weird catch-22. That's where that adage comes from. right? And it's all about vibrations. Like, I'm trying to just explain that everything is vibration. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's an actual chemical reaction. Each different chemical literally has a different vibration because it's got a different amount of particles orbiting nucleus. They're orbiting in different degrees compared to the nucleus. So I mean, you end up literally, you have a different vibration in that particle. The particle's different. It's going to be a completely different material. So with that being said, like, I feel that maybe I didn't cover everything, or maybe I didn't explain everything perfectly or properly. Like, I feel like something's missing. But at the same time, I think that's a really good introduction to anybody who knows nothing about quantum physics. Maybe it does explain it better to you, so that when you do come across any information about quantum physics, maybe you can understand it better now in the future. If not, then maybe you can start to understand it better. I mean, I've done a lot of studying, and I've had to think about things for long periods of time to be able to come to these understandings and come to these conclusions. So I mean, if you're not putting any energy into understanding it, then you're never going to understand it. The only way you're ever going to come to a higher understanding of these topics is if you put the energy in and you think about it. So that kind of goes back to the law of attraction that I was talking about before. When I was talking about different realities, I was talking about how the choices that you make literally will determine if you go to a new page or if you don't go to a new page. So I mean, your understanding of quantum physics might be right here right now, and you might want your understanding to be over here. So I mean, the only way to get from here to there is to make choices based on learning quantum physics. So I mean, the more choices you make about learning it and thinking about it, I mean, eventually you're going to migrate from here to this end of the book where you understand more about quantum physics. But if you don't take that original step and think about quantum physics to begin with, then you're not going to leave the first page. You're going to stay on it. And you can think of life in the same way. That's why if you want to be a doctor, you can become a doctor. Even if you didn't have good grades in high school, you could still put in the effort that you need and get what you need to be able to become the doctor that you want to be. But you got to put in the effort. And that's why things aren't predetermined in your life and in your existence right now, even though everything is predetermined. Like, all the options are there for you. Everything is existing simultaneously. You can go from where you are right now and go to where you want to go to. And I mean, the only thing that's limiting you, in essence, is the zero probability. That zero probability exists because there's things that you would never become because you're not interested in that in this life. There's lots of people that will never understand anything about quantum physics, and that might be their zero probability because they don't want to know about quantum physics. So I mean, if quantum physics is your zero probability, then you're never going to learn about quantum physics. You can still make the choice to start learning about quantum physics. And like I said, maybe once you make that choice, that even though it doesn't interest you, or even though you don't like it, and even if it's a zero probability for you, maybe you can, in essence, start a new probability curve by going outside of your original probability curve. I mean, if that's possible, then it opens up way more possibilities for us, rather than just being limited to the one particular little bell curve, right? If it's something that doesn't interest you, you're probably never going to get involved in it in your life. And if you are interested in quantum physics, then I suggest that you spend more time thinking about it, because the more you think about it and the more you throw it back and forth in your own head, sometimes the more you throw it back and forth with someone that's like-minded, I mean, the more likely you are to come to conclusions and to understand things. I hope this explains some things about the law of attraction and about ghosts and about alternate universes. I hope it's all clear and makes sense to you. I mean, I might do some more videos in the future about topics like this, because I've always been interested in it, and it's topics that I want to study and keep thinking about myself. I just want to help people understand the things that they're interested in. I want to try to dumb things down and make things a little bit more easy to understand, because when you're watching a lot of the things or reading books about quantum physics, it can be very technical, and the technicalities of it might be what's throwing you off from learning more about it. The more technical something gets, the harder it is to understand what it's actually trying to say, and the more you gotta break it down to its simplest parts. So I mean, I'm trying to break this down to its simplest parts to give people a good basis, place where they can start at, a place where when you start listening to a scientist that's talking all technically on the topic, you can actually hopefully start to hear and start to look into all the little intricacies that he's actually saying, because you're slowly developing your understanding of it. That's one thing that I found that I've been able to do in my life, is that when I hear someone talking about something I don't understand, I'm able to pick it apart piece by piece and kind of break it down to its simplest dimensions eventually. I mean, sometimes I gotta watch videos over and over and over again to break down those different parts. That's why you can watch a video 100 times, and every time you've watched it you see something different. It's because you'll get one point in your head, you'll mull it over in your mind for a long time, and it won't make sense. Eventually you break it down to a point where it does make sense. So now, because that makes sense, when you go watch the video again, all of a sudden another point comes up. You're like, oh, I understand that point. And then you think about it, and I mean, it's just an eventual progress from knowing nothing to knowing something. And I mean, you can do this with anything that you're interested in, or anything that you're not interested in your life. That's why spirituality, or the law of attraction, says anybody can become anything. It's just a matter of what you put your attention to. So, but you need to have the action. If you don't put in the action and you don't put in the time, you're not going to progress towards that particular outcome. Probability curves, when it comes to atoms and particles, they do move and they do fluctuate, and you can move yourself and your probabilities into a space that you absolutely hate, or into a space that you are not attracted to. It's just a matter, if you put the attention there, you'll get there. You just need to keep putting consistent attention into that. Like I said, I'm gonna try to break this down some more in future videos. I hope this made sense. If it didn't make sense and you need more clarity on anything, I mean, I will answer questions, and I mean, I will sometimes make videos based on comments, like information that people want more of. But hopefully this is a good start for you. Hopefully you understand more now than what you did before about quantum physics, and hopefully this opens up the door for you to more easily be able to learn about quantum physics in the future. And I hope it opened up some people's minds about the possibilities, because I mean, some people are so close-minded about ghosts and the existence of ghosts that they won't even allow themselves to even think that there's any possibility of ghosts existing. When you think about it in this way, like the book of pages and the sheets, and I mean how the sheets are so close together, and there's just a tiny little bit that's separating the two sheets. I mean, when you think about it that way, those sheets can touch at any given time. Once you have it touching, there's an overlap and an overlay. Like those pages, they're not sitting still. They are literally vibrating. So eventually those pages are going to touch, and realities are going to overlap, and you're literally moving through dimensions on a daily basis. Like, you're a dimensional traveler, and the things you're thinking about now and the attention, like the places you're putting your attention to right now, that's going to determine which page you end up on in the future. I hope this makes sense to you. There's going to be a lot more studying that I have to do into this topic, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot more studying that you have to do in this topic too. But I hope that was a good start for you, and I hope it explains some things. I hope it opens up your mind to new possibilities, and I look forward to doing more videos for you in the future. I hope you have a great day. Bye.